Welcome back. You here with Goldberg. Today I'll be talking about my view of the pincushion, the booty shots, the injection, however you want to term it, and whether I would see that as potentially disqualifying for a future mate. Well, the bulk of this video is going to be about our experience over the last several years and my inability to look past it. I know now they're trying to memory hole and say, oh, we never really had lockdowns. Let's just move on. It's the normal. I will never forget this. I will propagandize for what I saw, for what is actually fact. I will not allow people to just shrug it off. And this is because I still see the occasional comment of those who want to defend the narrative. Not say, oh, I made a mistake. No, they want to actually be lock, stock, and barrel, the big patriot for the pharmaceutical industry. And I have to think maybe they're backtrack cucking because they regret their decisions. I think that's actually worse than just admitting maybe you made a mistake. But a lot of people don't want to do that as I guess their ego's too bound up within it. We'll start, however, going back to fall of 2019. I received a flu shot, one of those free at work. I'd only had another flu shot back in 2017, also through a different company. And in both instances, I got sick either right away or within a few months. In the case of 2019, it was February of 2020 when I was out of work for about 5 days, bedridden for about 1.5 days, I would say. Went to the clinic and they said, you have the flu. At this point, they didn't possess the actual COVID tests, as I recall. And the nurse practitioner, she said, don't bother getting the flu shots. They're a waste of time. It's just a gimmick for corporations to make money. I was like, okay, that's honesty. You don't often get that from the white coats, so certainly an endorsement of sorts. But, all right, I was sick. People get the flu. It's not this, oh my gosh, this has never happened before. And for the duration of the pandemic, only one time I tested positive, which was December of 21. I had a mild head cold. But even there, if you had a sniffle, you had like a sore throat, there were other instances I had to be off from work, not because I couldn't work. 2 years before that, you'd go to work if you take some Robitussin, suck it up. Oh, now we have to shut down the economy, lose all this productivity. People can't go to work. Businesses have to be put into these restrictions because, oh my God, a pandemic. And it should give you reason for pause. But for a lot of people, this was normal because some authority figure was telling them what to do. Now, despite all that, this was my general position as I relayed to a coworker at the time. I don't believe it's real. I think it's a bunch of BS. It's highly exaggerated and politicized, but I understand there's some older folks who are understandably, they're more concerned. So I will observe some basic precautions. You should be wiping down your area at work in general. That's just the civilized thing to do. You can wear the mask, but within limits, not if I'm doing physically demanding activities. I'm not going to wear it 24/7. In fact, I had this one boomer that was claiming it was a scam-a-rona. Then he got scared and began screaming at me because I forgot to put the mask back on for like a minute or something of that nature. It does illustrate that people become, they just freakazoids essentially over something that even for old people was not that deadly. And that's why my initial skepticism, even just looking at the figures, like this is not a tremendous risk. Why are we, trying to move heaven and earth because of this supposed threats? And that should have made people wake up, but I guess it was a little bit difficult. Now, if you recall, in, I want to say March of 2020, they said 2 weeks to flatten the curve, to compress the land whale. So they go out and they lock down all these businesses. The stock market collapses, but they were very selective. So it was like the barber shops, the bars, the little restaurants. You couldn't just stay open with limited, guests. No, you had to be shut down. Oh, but Walmart can stay open. You can go get your soda and your chips there. You can go to the liquor store, no problem. Owning your own company, a small business, maintaining it, building it from the ground up is quintessentially American, and they wanted to essentially quash that. So, just be a CEO, just be a corporation, right? That's the message. Now, you might have sort of understood that if they were kind of even-handed. But as we saw very quickly, it was just it was a very corrupt set of contradictions, because predominantly cream cheese people came out and protested because they couldn't run their businesses. They lost their livelihood. They were attacked as super spreaders. I read 2 books that came out in 2022 by center-left types, and they claimed these white people were, they were practicing their white privilege because they wanted to infect black, brown, people of color, as they say. And now that was interesting because later on, the new narrative was that the rich cream cheesers were hoarding all the injections so that the POCs would die, even though, as we know, the POCs had one of the highest hesitancy rates, especially black people. But I didn't see a single mainstream news source writing articles about how black people were trying to infect and kill everyone. So it's always about, the perspective and the ideology. It's not about science. It never was. Because, of course, they were censoring science. They were censoring doctors and trying to threaten the credentials of doctors who were giving alternative points of view and saying, this is hysteria, we're making mistakes. So no, it was not, oh, we just follow the science. You follow the politicized science, the I effing love science, the religion of science, if you will. May 2020. Tremendous nationwide eruption in reaction to the death of George Floyd in police custody. Millions of people going out, smashing, rioting, burning, looting, killing others. Now, I would submit this is a bit of an issue in the middle of a pandemic. You've been saying small businesses cannot operate even if people wear masks. But all these individuals in the streets, should there not be cops going out to arrest them for like felony public endangerment in the middle of a pandemic? Oh, but it's different. It's historically butthurt Americans protesting against the police state. So now we must protest before more white supremacists arrive. In fact, the enlightened egg sperms who said that these comparatively very small lockdown protests were super spreaders said, well, white supremacy is a public health threat. There's no evidence that there has been COVID transmit. Really, there's no evidence. In fact, when Trump was claiming that these protests were going to expand COVID, they were, oh, no, it's early opening of businesses. Really, not the millions of people in the streets. It's the early opening of businesses. So it just shows you there was never going to be consistency. This was all about manipulation, because as long as a certain group was doing it, as long as it aligned with the plural left's narrative, because, as much as the GOP went out and they were trying to buy the votes of black people for years with criminal justice reform and, handouts here, tax cuts there, Brexit, all that stuff was irrelevant because at the end of the day, they were still dragged back into the same position where, oh, yeah, you support the police, oh, we've got it. I mean, it was so comical to just notice, but also very sad, that ultimately is a complete double standard. And this, as on the one hand, it's, these hospitals are war zones. We need to have a national reckoning on race. You can't postpone that till the pandemic's over. You need to do it now. So you knew this entire thing was political. I said this is a bunch of BS. I'm not taking this serious anymore because it's obvious that the people in power are not serious. If they're concerned about people getting sick and dying, then they're going to crack down on this aggressively. But of course, they were trying to undermine it for political reasons. Go figure. So we move on to the 2020 election, and Trump's out there going, thanks to Operation Cuck Speed, we now have an injection to save the world. Don't vote for Biden because he's not going to crack down on the protesters who I haven't cracked down on. Law and order. That was the end of Trump's presidency. I pointed this out. In the conservatism book, it's a central aspect. Trump failed to be decisive. He failed to defend the legitimacy of the state. He was being undermined by certain conservatives, but there were ways he could have gone past them and still put up a strong force. So, regardless, Uncle Joe's in power. Now I effing love science. We're safe. But it's interesting, more people reportedly died of COVID under Biden, even though you had the injection more widely available, even though he mandated it. Not that I actually believe those people died of COVID. You have to remember, this was either the CARES Act or the other rescue package they put through. They were giving Medicare bonuses to hospitals who said that people died of COVID. So that's why hospitals had no incentive. If someone got shot, someone died in a car accident, they would say COVID because they're going to get more money. You literally incentivize the prolonging of a pandemic. You have to understand everything in this country revolves around money and corporate profits. If you don't get that, you're very naive. But so Biden's in power, and they start trying to do the soft encouragement to get this injection. And it's stuff like, oh, you can get a scholarship, you can get lottery tickets, you can get Krispy Kreme donuts. It kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? Like, if you go to a dentist and afterwards they give you a lollipop, wouldn't that be kind of counterintuitive? You want to be healthy with your teeth, but have a lollipop? It makes no sense. It'll also be kind of disgusting after getting your teeth cleaned. But I was like, okay, I will cooperate with the testing, which, by the way, I'm still doing to this day because of my special status. I'll do the masking within limits. I'm not good at actually doing the masking anymore because it's a bunch of BS. And even the masks they were giving us for probably a year and a half, and they said, oh, these things don't actually work. Go figure. You put it up to your face and your beard is like sticking through the mask. The bristles is definitely not going to prevent transmission of any sort. So their next act is to say you have to get it or you lose your job. Now, I'm incredibly suspicious of anything that's forced in that manner because why? This is not killing a lot of people. Even older folks are recovering for the most part, and that's assuming we can trust those figures of casualties. Why are you demanding it? I could sort of, be able to wrap my head around a 50-plus mandate, but trying to put it into folks who are younger, especially when it's so new, that's not a wise decision unless it's about power and profits. So I was, of course, opposed to it. I also have an issue with this mentality because I had a coworker, he was morbidly obese, call out all the time, crappy employee. Comparatively, I'm a very dedicated person, 2019 especially, I was doing a lot of hours, whatnot. And I say, oh, so it doesn't matter. The whole meritocracy, work hard, doesn't frickin' matter. They don't care. I didn't see a single big corporation step up to defend the rights of their employees, even though all these patriot simps donated to stop Obamacare, donated Americans for Prosperity, all these pro-business, anti-regulation policies. All these corporations just rolled over. They didn't care. That says a lot about it. That's why you can't trust corporations. All you guys that simp for the private sector versus the government, they're both bad as far as I'm concerned. But I just don't like that. I don't like when you completely write off the fact that myself, I work out consistently, I eat healthy, I take supplements, I'm not overweight. Oh, it doesn't matter. You have to do the same thing. It reminds me of, when you're a kid and you maybe have a sibling that just manages to muck it up for everyone else. Like you're going to go and do something enjoyable as a group, but then that one person manages to just derail it last minute. And the parents who are cowards will go, oh, well, you all get punished, not just them. Why? Why don't you pick the person that's actually screwed up and discipline them? In this case, if you really think it's a threat, then mandate that the obese people, the unhealthy people get it, and other people can just do what they were doing. Because you know how we went from you're an anti-masker if you don't want to wear it, if you die and you didn't like a mask, you're, oh, sorry, anti-masker. But then once this injection came out, even if you were fine with a mask and the social distancing, oh no, now you're an anti-vaxxer. So you see how their narrative constantly changed so they could have more control over your life, and yet people think, well, it's just inevitable. No, not for me. That's just not how I roll. Much as I was opposed, you have the inevitable counter-stimuli, like the libertarian conspiracy theorist who ranted for months about how they were going to force it on us, you'd never do it was going to kill us all. Then he runs out before there's even a mandate to get stuck because he wanted to be a good little company boy. Or the others that are going, oh, just do it, man. What's the big deal? Reminded me of the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie where there's the two of them left. The guy goes out to scout for something and he comes back and the woman has actually fallen asleep. And she's like, oh, just Dave, you gotta give in. Just lay down with me. And he feels insane, but that's legitimately the way it was. The race baiter black guy who was opposed to it when Trump was in power, but all of a sudden became the big Biden bitch as soon as it was a Democrat. And he gave me this speech about how if we, as human beings, we want to visit the moon and Mars, we have to get vaccinated. But I tried to do my best because, like anyone else, you've got obligations. I'd reached a position in my life where things were more financially stable. I could afford some niceties, and you're going, do you want to give those up? So I tried to gaslight myself to their position. I tried to go looking at what the egg sperms were saying, the settled science. I even suggest, oh, maybe I'll do the Johnson & Johnson, and then I'll do an aggressive detox like the C60 and the pine tree tea. And I don't believe that's doable. I don't think you can actually flush an injection out of your body by detoxing. But I realized what it was coming down to is the fear of not having fiat. And that's what controls most people. That's why people, it doesn't matter if they have Gadsden flag, believe this, believe that. They're not willing to make a sacrifice. It's one thing if you were the only breadwinner, or I knew people who were threatened they weren't going to see their kids anymore if they didn't get stuck, or they were going to lose their marriage. I mean, it's sad that we've reached that position, but this is clown world. But for myself especially, it was like, I have no reason to do this except for money. And when I tried to get to the position where I was like, yes, I'm on board, as I described, I had this spiritual affliction or rot that I felt. Mind you, I'm more of an agnostic person. I'm not super religious. I would say I'm 85% rational, maybe 5% superstitious, 10% emotional, but I could not shake that feeling. And this is despite the fact that I'm not one of those natural-born libertarians. I have to say, I have to be against you just because, but it just felt wrong, and I decided to take that decision. I lost probably like 30 to 40K in potential income. I'm not bitter about that, because I felt it was the right decision, and it gave me a sense of freedom that I never really had before. A lot of people, they say they believe something, but as soon as their job is threatened, they roll over. And being able to not be one of those, it was just a tremendous experience. Now, more recently, we've been seeing this disturbing pattern where not just people who are old, but in their 30s, their 20s, their teens, even little kids are dropping dead inexplicably. And you can go, well, that's all conspiracy theory. It's been amplified by the nut jobs online. Oh, all right, so let's say that you're correct. We have social media now, because when I was a teenager, I never heard of a young person having a heart attack. I knew one kid that had an aneurysm. That was really shocking, but usually you died because you drove drunk or you OD'd. You didn't die of a heart attack. Not the child of not the America I come from. But let's suppose it's just because of social media. You have to remember, though, this whole pandemic, if you didn't know someone who specifically and can be confirmed got COVID and was hospitalized, you wouldn't know it existed if not for social media and the government and corporations. They were the ones who told you it was real. You had to be made to believe. You had to wear a mask and see other people doing so. You had to be inculcated with that fear. I mean, it was a great project for those who watch Avengers and drink lattes and are concerned about climate change. It was fantastic for them. They have meaningless lives. They could feel like a superhero, but you had to be told. Otherwise, most people would have been, oh yeah, he's got the flu. He's going to be out for a few days. Oh, he's got a head cold. Take some Robitussin and shut the hell up. That's the reality. So you can make whatever claims you want, and still today, after almost 70% have gotten supposedly 2 shots, after we had the official declaration the pandemic's over, they're still trying to censor information, medical information. They're trying to go after the licenses of doctors who betray the narrative. When that Died Suddenly movie came out, they said, oh, it's a conspiracy theorist. They didn't really debunk anything. They just tried to say, well, what they're arguing about blood clots, that can be caused by COVID. Yeah, everything, COVID causes everything. That was also what was so useful. It's like when these PUAs say, this is game. Game is everything. COVID was everything. It was a very effective tool for them. And it's why I realized it, especially when I had to make this decision. You know that old quote, I think it's from the Bible, about the camel, and it goes, it is easier for Lizzo to pass through a garden hose than for a soy boy to abandon the narrative. there's much truth to that. When it comes to what's been going on, especially the last year, when you've had Pfizer, or was it Moderna, that came out and said they were going to provide a vaccine or a pill to stop heart attacks, to stop blood clots, to stop these strokes. And you're like, oh, now you're going to market the solution to the problem you very likely created. I don't know for certain. I hope it's not the case. But one can't, you can't fail to pay attention. If you're still got your head in your ass at this point because oh, no, well, you can do whatever you want. I'm just saying, pay attention, because this seems to be developing into a larger problem. I will put a link to a forum thread that compiles a lot of these. You're free to look at that. The information is out there. If you just search in news died suddenly, you'll find a lot where it's like, really? Teenagers? When did teenagers drop dead? When was that a commonality? So I'll leave it as it is. That's my view on the pandemic. Would it affect my choice of if I was going to get married and have kids? By the way, that may not be in the cards for me. I'm not a delusional type. I'm 100% aware of any delusions I might have, unlike a lot of people on the internet.com. But you have to ask yourself the question, why did they do it? Was it because they had no choice, or they just do it to conform? But this is not like it's an understandable social conformity bias, because this is a sick and degenerate society. So if you meet a girl and she's quote-unquote conservative, or Christian, or Muslim, or ortho Care Bear, you meet someone like that and they did it because they wanted to conform when they already don't like that society. It's just like these patriot conservatives that do whatever Biden says because they want to keep their jacked up truck. You cannot trust someone like that. I think this was a big separator. It was about who's actually serious about what they believe and how they want to live, and who is just trying to go along and get along. It's a very real dynamic, and that's why with a chick, you have to be careful, not just because that's a decision they've made in a conformity sense, but what's going to be the impact on their health? Will it potentially be transmitted to you? We haven't gotten clear data on that as far as the mRNA. Can that be transferable? Now, you could make the argument, perhaps, if you're more cynical as a red pillar, well, after 5 years, I guess that marriage is going to go its own way. That's pretty messed up. But, these are things to stop and consider. I know that there's going to be a very small population that chose to defy because they knew it was wrong. And that's why you're going to have slim pickings. So I'm not assuming this is an option for everyone, but I'm certainly not going to ignore that, because it does call into question who they are. So with that being said, let me know, what was your experience with it? Did you buy into the narrative? Did you get stuck? Did you not? What was your justification? And did you potentially lose any job, any relationships or friendships because you took a stand based on what you believed to be right or what you thought was healthy?